You know, every so often a good live-action adaptation of a classic animated movie comes along, and this is not one of them. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today we're talking all about Disney's live-action adaptation of Pinocchio, which drops on Disney Plus exclusively this week, September 8th. So when you go ahead and watch it on Disney Plus Day, let me know down below in the comments what you think of the film, and if it really rises to your expectations, if it surpasses them, or if you're kind of in the dumps, because I'll let you know which side of the fence I fall on, you guys. But the film was directed by Robert Zemeckis, who is the mastermind behind plenty of classic films in Hollywood, and the cast is starring Tom Hanks as Geppetto, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who voices Jiminy Cricket, and Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, who voices our real boy, Pinocchio. Now, in case you've forgotten a lot about the classic film, which I haven't seen in many years, let me give you a little bit of a summary of what you can expect with this adaptation. This is the live-action and CGI retelling of the beloved tale of Pinocchio, a wooden puppet who embarks on a thrilling adventure to become a real boy. Now, trust me, I have some positives and some negatives for this film, but before we get into all of my thoughts, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, or you're not a real boy, and give me a little thumbs up and like this video if you enjoy this review, and if you want to see more just like it, because there's a lot to talk about with this one, guys. But without spoiling too much, let's get into my positives, because you know I'd like to start off on an optimistic note, and it begins with our titular character of Pinocchio. Benjamin Evan Ainsworth voices Pinocchio, and I thought he did a really good job at capturing the innocence, the childlike innocence of this character, and a lot of the joy that the character brings. When I was a kid and I watched Pinocchio, I really loved, well, what Pinocchio kind of stood for. He's a kid trying to become a real boy, and sometimes he lies, but he learns from his mistakes and shortcomings, and by the end, of course, he turns into a real boy. We'll talk about the ending for this film in a little bit, but I will tell you that Benjamin Evan Ainsworth did a nice job at really giving it his all and making, well, the best out of a script that is otherwise pretty lackluster. And while we're on the topic of voice acting, I gotta say, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is an actor that I love and respect, and he's got a great filmography, and here, well, his performance was inconsistent at best, but there were some bright moments. Whenever he is with Pinocchio, I do think that both of them have a pretty darn good synergy about them, and I like their back and forth dialogue. I just find it very odd that, well, they gave some lines that they did for Jiminy Cricket. It just never felt like it worked, and you can tell Joseph Gordon-Levitt was kind of saying it through his teeth. But you know, there were some moments with Jiminy Cricket that I thought were pretty okay. And this next actor is someone who I actually love in pretty much everything I've seen her in, and that is Cynthia Erivo, who plays Blue Fairy. And even though she's in the movie for maybe one scene, if I remember correctly, she does bring a lot of personality and breathes a fresh breath of air into this first half that it desperately needed. Sure, her appearance came very early in the movie and we don't really see her at all for the rest of the film, but you can tell that she brings a sort of bravado to this film that I think was needed among our entire cast, but instead, well, things kind of fall by the wayside. I do think that Cynthia Erivo, though, does a nice job here. I just kind of wish we saw more of her in the film. But outside of the acting, you guys, I felt like the visual effects were pretty solid for the most part, especially in the first half. You know, I did really love what they were able to accomplish with Pinocchio and how they animated Pinocchio, and it did feel like there were some elements that were, of course, live action CGI, and then there were some elements that felt kind of cartoonish, and that was really dope. You can see that really in Pinocchio's eyes. But I do like the VFX work, and you can tell that there were you know, moments that the budget wasn't really poured into, but for the most part the VFX work was pretty solid, and I enjoyed what we saw, again, for the most part. But with that, there are all of my positives, guys, and I don't have any more because it's sad to say, but this version of Pinocchio is, quite frankly, pretty awful. So yeah, of course, we're getting into my negatives now. I really could not buy into this new take on Pinocchio. Sometimes live action retellings work okay, and in other instances like this, it just feels like the creative decisions that they're making aren't very sound, and unfortunately there are some bits of acting, directing, and writing that really don't do this classic tale justice. So let's begin at least with the acting, because for as much as I think Tom Hanks, bless his soul, he is such a great actor, lately some of his accents have not worked for the characters he's portrayed, like in Elvis, and now here in Pinocchio you can add another one to the list. What he does with Geppetto is kind of comical, but in the worst way possible. It really is a caricature of the original character in the animated film, and it just did not really work, and it wasn't smooth. There was a lot of forced dialogue here with this character, and we hardly see him. And that is an issue in and of itself, because the film is really trying to hit home the message at the end of the film in the third act that Geppetto feels so close to Pinocchio and wants to save him and would even risk his own life to do so, but there's not enough time with Geppetto on screen and Pinocchio together to where you build up to that emotion. There is actually a lack of emotion anyway in this film, but you can tell that it is void, or devoid honestly, with the character of Geppetto. But even surrounding Tom Hanks, there are a lot of antagonists in this film, like Honest John, that don't really land or pack a punch. Maybe because I'm not a kid and I probably would not feel intimidated by these characters, but I remember feeling a little bit more impact in the original animated film. And compared to this movie, there's really not much to go off of. It feels like things are just fleeting, a lot of moments kind of just flying by, and even the most grandiose of scenes like Pleasure Island just don't land. At times there's lots of fanfare, like again what we get in Pleasure Island, but there's really none of the impact that is felt, and I really wanted much more in this department because I think it would have helped the second half of the movie tremendously. And this is where the direction and writing comes in, because Robert Zemeckis co-wrote the script, but he did direct the movie solo, and I don't know what's going on with Robert Zemeckis. His last good film to me was Flight in 2012, and that's maybe a stretch because even though it's good, there are still some faults with it that I found, and I will say that this film, Pinocchio, doesn't do a good job at building up to this emotion whatsoever. Whenever there's conflict, I felt zero effects, and there's a lot of shoddy character development. I mean, the decisions that they make with Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio, Geppetto, I mean, it just never ever felt good. It never felt impactful. I know I keep going back to that word, but there's just nothing here that made me feel. And that's a problem. There's also a lack of charm and wonder, which is something that I remember feeling with the original film. You know, with the blue fairy, the magic, a wooden puppet coming to life, for goodness sakes. But the first act, even the first half of this film, is just such a slog, you guys. It gets out of the gates so slowly, and I'm almost wondering, are we watching a horror film, or are we because it's so dark, are we watching a live action retelling of Pinocchio, which should probably be brighter and hopefully a little bit more cheerful as we get into the film? And instead it does feel like it's all out of whack. There's really no tonal consistency in this movie, and it doesn't necessarily know what it wants to do, especially by the ending, which, okay, I guess we should talk about that now too, right? There are a few creative changes in this film compared to the original that I really didn't like. One of them, or two of them, being these new songs that they added. One with this wooden puppet named Sabina, and it just felt out of place. I'm so sorry, but guys, sometimes the new songs they add into these live action Disney films, they can work, and sometimes, well, they do not, and most of the time, especially as of late, they have not worked. And this is also a film where I feel like the new songs just feel very random. They feel like it just happened. There's no real weight attached to these songs, and I was just going through the motions listening to them and wondering, when am I supposed to smile? And then there's the difference in the endings. In the original film, of course, we know Pinocchio turns into a real boy, and let's just say that is changed here in this movie. And that actually breaks my heart. There's an alteration in this ending, right, that really just did not work. It didn't click with me, and instead what it did was it felt like the entire ride, the experience that we were on, was not worth it. That's the biggest issue with an ending like this, where it never feels complete. I don't need an ending to always spell things out for me, but at least make it worth the time that I spent with this movie. I spent an hour and 45 minutes with this live action film, and I got to the end and I thought, why? It doesn't help that the VFX work gets pretty bad as we get into this final chunk of the film too, and honestly guys, I was just bored. I hate that bit of criticism sometimes, bored, but guys, this movie really doesn't offer anything that is pleasing. That's the thing. I walked away from this film thinking, did it add to my life? It did not. It didn't even make me feel happy, and by the end I can understand what they were trying to go for, but the ending to the classic film works so well because the entire film Pinocchio is trying to be a real boy, and the ending to this 2022 version is just, well, I can see why it went to Disney Plus, I guess. So overall, you guys, what do I really think about Pinocchio? let's just say I am not a fan. And will this movie find an audience? I think it could for kids who are looking for a live action retelling like this. I just don't necessarily know if even kids would appreciate this. I know parents probably won't, but I do think that this film, again, it is so slow out of the gate, and when it finally finds its footing, sort of, in the middle of the film, there's just a fleeting sense of, okay, when are we really going to get into the meat and potatoes of this story? And we never get there. Not everyone is awful here. Again, Benjamin Evan Ainsworth does a good job voicing Pinocchio, and then you have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who tries his hardest, but again, this script is so tough because there is a lot of forced dialogue. I felt nothing natural about this movie, whether they were floating in between scenes or they were trying to really build up to this grand finale. A lot of this movie just falls completely flat for me. But since it's on Disney Plus and it doesn't cost anything extra to watch it, I'd imagine you are going to watch this movie. So let me know in the comments what you think of it. But if I had to even rate this film, oh boy, yeah, I'd probably give it like a 2 out of 5, guys. It just, again, it's maybe even lower. I don't know. I would say 2 out of 5 just because I'm not trying to be negative, but there is just a lot of bad in this film and not enough good to really counterbalance everything, and I just really wish that this movie was more effective. But again, there you have it. That's my real review and all of my thoughts on Pinocchio, the live action film that is landing on Disney Plus September 8th. So when you watch it again, let me know down below if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, or if you're kind of in the middle, and hit the big red button below. Subscribe to the channel, guys, and tap on the bell so you don't miss out on any more reviews and content just like this. We're heading into D23 weekend, and I'm so excited to bring you all of my coverage because, well, there's going to be a lot. Yeah, especially a lot of Marvel news. But again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. And see, my nose didn't grow because I am going to catch you at the next screening. I didn't say like physically, I mean on YouTube. Okay, I gotta stop.